Even communication with others, that can impact things as well, because our perception of how the person's behaved is totally different from the perception of the person that we're interacting with.
What time was that, Diana? What time today?
Oh, when I sent the email out,
Yeah, and it was
oh,
when the error came back.
I think about 4:30, I think.
Oh, okay, so it must be Mercury then, because I had an error in an account. So I trade the stock market,
Yeah.
and I had 200 shares of a certain position, and for certain reasons I wanted to reduce it to 100. So I filled in the form, send in the sale, and the print came up 200. So I reduced it to 100, pushed the sell button, and it sold 200. So I thought, well, okay, I was hoping it would be the same time. Then we could say, okay, for sure that was Mercury retrograde. But I don't know when the exact moments when Mercury goes retrograde. But I think,
Like it's over days.
Well,
yeah.
it's ending on the October 2nd.
Yeah, yeah. The next one, part 3, is about, are your intentions pure? This is another one by Lynne McTaggart.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to play this one because I think it relates to what Brent had said, that he didn't notice anything significant when we were doing the healing. And also, Cody, you haven't seen your friend Susie yet, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So,
She's
but
tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. So we'll get some feedback on her later. But this one, I think, it kind of relates to that whole idea of having, clear intentions, right?
I put this thing up, are your motives pure? Because there was a very interesting study of alcoholics. It was a prayer study. And what they did was divided a group of alcoholics in two, and half of them prayed for by their nearest and dearest. And the researchers were astonished to find that the people receiving prayer did worse than the others. Now, they were fascinated by this, and they interpreted this to mean that the people sending intention had mixed motives. They could have been people who were sending intention for increased survival and for them to stop drinking, but not really mean it. Alcoholics are tough to live with. They could have been sending intention, an unconscious intention, for that person to die and to free them. Or they could be a codependent. They could be somebody who was also a drinker and didn't want to lose his or her drinking buddy. So when you're sending intention, it's important to think about what it is you're really sending. We all pretend to send happy thoughts, including to people who we don't like very much. But we have to try to get to that place of real sense of compassion and real understanding of what it is we're sending. I just want to look at this whole idea, too, of psychic bubble. A lot of people think of protection as just that, a wall. I want to create a psychic bubble around myself so that all the awful people at work who are constantly glaring at me or sniping at me or whatever can't get to me. I want you to think about this in terms of what we've talked about all weekend. If we are all one, if we are trying to establish connection, the last thing you want to do is create a psychic bubble, a barrier to that. Besides which, I'm not clear that it works. There have been 2 studies of this by William Broad, the guy whose name I couldn't remember yesterday, the psychologist. I had a senior moment, I guess. William Broad did a lot of work on seeing if you could psychically shield yourself from intention. So he would have 2 groups, one sending intention to the other. And oftentimes when they do these kinds of studies, they register the effect by measuring the autonomic nervous system of the recipient. And they find when somebody sends an intention, even if they stare at the other person without the person knowing it, the recipient will receive a change in his autonomic nervous system, almost like a shock. So we're constantly picking up all the time. It's been demonstrated. So he wanted to see if the recipients could think of a barrier to this. And so he had them think of whatever barrier worked for them, a moat, a brick wall, anything like that. And he found, in one case, it worked. The people thinking of a wall, etc., would stop that kind of effect on the autonomic nervous system. They would, in a sense, protect themselves. They tried to replicate it, and they found it didn't work. So I think from there's no good evidence to show that works, and it also doesn't make sense. If you're trying to open yourself up to intention, I think there's a better way. I think instead of protection, you want surrender. And let me suggest this in certain ways. I think you look at protecting yourself from the perspective of relationship. There are two ways to see this. One is the idea that it's not a single bad thing coming to you, but it's the relationship. You know, Clinton's comment, it's the economy stupid. It's almost like we need to say, is the relationship stupid to ourselves? And of course, not really calling ourselves stupid, because that would be a negative intention. But just constantly thinking of it ourselves in relationship. If you're having a bad time with someone else, it's your relationship that's the problem, not them being bad guys. So one of the first and simplest ways of doing something with them is to send them a positive intention. You know, I love this book, The Gentle Art of Blessing, because the guy in this, the author, had a terrible situation. He was pushed out of his own company. And for years, he just resented the people who had done this to him. He thought they'd taken away everything. And then he realized that the person who was really harmed by this was himself. So he stopped doing that. He started sending blessing to these people who had harmed them. He blessed everything about them. May they flourish and multiply. He blessed their children. He wanted them to have great riches. He sent blessing, blessing, blessing. And suddenly, he found his life was turning around. It wasn't just they who were the recipients of good intention. He was the recipient of good intention. He was getting all the benefit, and their relationship changed. So I throw this out as a suggestion. I know there are occasions where some people are just so on a different plane than you are that you can't come together. But before you try that, before you conclude that, just try some positive intention to them. Just send out intention to your worst nightmare and see what happens to it. Send intention to the person who is just making your life a misery and see if that doesn't change the relationship. I think any kind of positive intention can heal any kind of situation. And I think we found from just our little story of the runaway that it doesn't have to be a bodily problem. It can also be a psychic problem. So try that and just see. But it's about really getting to that place of compassion for that person, really walking a mile in their shoes and really seeing where they're coming from. And that gets you in that place of compassion. Even if you have to imagine things, imagine why they're so angry at you. Imagine why it is they're making your life a living hell. What is it from their perspective? And if you can see it from their perspective, you might be able to send out a pure intention.
Okay.
She's pretty good.
Yeah, I really like her work. I've read The Intention Experiment and a bit of The Feel.
She
And
doesn't mind being comfortable with her own, inside her own head as she explains things. It's like, well, you're here anyways, you might as well listen to me. And she seems very natural in doing it.
she is, yeah. I find her very sincere in her work. Dave, any comments?
No, not at this juncture.
Yeah. Cody, Faith?
Yeah, I
have
like-
one.
I like
Oh,
her. Sorry.
Go ahead, Faith.
I like her. But yeah, she makes a good point of like, okay, so if you're have negativity still towards that person and you send, loving vibes, I mean, how can you still do that? You know what I mean? Like, do it anyway. Is that how it works? Or like, how do you know?
Yeah. And I think you do have to, I think like she said, you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Right?
Yeah, but if you're still angry at that person for some reason, or frustrated, or they stressed or whatever. Or
Yeah.
bewilders.
You, you wait, right? You just wait.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting the experiment with the alcoholics because people in their relationship with the alcoholic, even though they want to send good intentions, they had mixed motives about it.
I think you have to walk away from your own anger as opposed to run away from it. You have to understand where it came from in you, and that's really difficult because anger is negative, and none of us want to think of ourselves as negative or imperfect. I think that's true for everybody. But to accept that imperfection in you and be okay with it, then that's ideal. That's what we all want, I would think.
Yeah, trying to get to why that anger is within you, or
Yeah.
yeah. The other thing about that relationship, that sending intentions to somebody who's affecting your life, your motive, right? You have to examine that, because are you sending it so that you're more comfortable, that you're relieved from this, this
Yeah, that's good.
problem
Keep going.
relationship?
Yeah.
Or, or are you sending it to really just for them? Because yeah,
I think whose benefit is it?
Yeah.
Hopefully it's both. Hopefully it's everybody's.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
got to find out all the good. I'm going to share all the goodness I know about you or with you. But what if I don't know enough goodness? What if things still fall apart? Where do I go then?
I think there still has to be some compassion and empathy, even a little bit, in order for that to work or to feel any good intentions, for
Yeah.
It's not just you doing it. That, like Diane says, the connection between your intentions felt by somebody else and yourself is both. I think they're both involved in it. I guess ideally it's you investigate what that other person has been feeling and if you have any effect on them.
Yeah. I also want to go back to when we were sending healing to Brent last week. Again, we only know Brent from our relationship online, and we don't know a lot of his background. So it's not like we had the opportunity to build a strong relationship. So even though he said he welcomed our thoughts and that, it's not that we had, negative, effect on him. We did, but I think it was kind of neutralized in the fact that we just didn't have a strong enough attachment to him to have a greater impact on it. I appreciate anyone's feedback on that.
I can add a couple of pennies worth here. What she was talking about in this whole thing was the theme of karma. So we can create our own karma, and if we are going to create our own karma and create the karma of others, then we want to create the kind that makes everybody happy. So if we love everybody else, then that is the cause of everybody else to love us. So that when that goes on, it's magic. But it is the law of cause and effect, or the laws of karma. So with our friend Brent, so we sent him our intention, basically it's a form of love, an intention to heal. And then the fact that he didn't feel it doesn't make a bit of difference, because maybe he's just not the kind of a guy who feels things. Do we feel it? Did we feel love for him? Did we feel a really sincere desire to heal? And if we did our job. Good for us.
Yeah, that's true. I know in Reiki, one thing they say is you should, when possible, it's not always possible, actually ask the person first, can we send healing to them, right? Because when they know something's being done in a good way for them, that I think has a psychological effect on them as well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so anyway.
Especially if they feel it and know where it's coming from. Whereas if they didn't know and all of a sudden they felt good, and that was a result of somebody giving them good intentions, it's a shame because that connection wouldn't be there.
I told this story last week, Barry, when Dave was at work one time, this is a few years ago, and I was practicing my Reiki, and I thought, oh, I'll send some to him, distant healing, right? While he's working, and he came home at lunchtime. He said, you were sending me Reiki. I said, yes. He said, I could feel it. Right.
Wow.
And I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him I was going to do it. So.
Wow. Mary, with a real sensitive guy there. Good
Yeah.
stuff. That's cool.
Faith and comment. So this next one is, what is your mission statement? And this is where she gets into really clarifying in your mind, why are you here? And she does a really good job on this, because she doesn't say you have to do some great masterpiece or some work while you're here. And she'll start talking more about that. So.
But there's another interesting way of doing this too. I think, you know, besides psychic bubble, one thing that's been really interesting to me are two elements, and they both come from the work of John Diamond. Dr. John Diamond is one of my favorite healers, and he's a dear friend of both of ours. He pioneered behavioral kinesiology with the very recently deceased George Goodhart, who developed kinesiology, which is muscle testing. George Goodhart made the most brilliant intuitive leap that a noxious substance of any sort placed on your body makes your muscles weak. So if you're allergic to something, you're not just allergic to it in terms of hives or whatever, but if you put that subject on that substance on yourself, your muscles would test weak too. So Dr. Diamond was one of the first to make an intuitive leap that toxic thoughts would also create weakness in the body. And it's quite amazing to watch him. He'll sit there with a subject and say, your mother doesn't love you. And all of a sudden, boom, their arm goes down. You have a flat tire, and boom, their arm goes down. That annoying neighbor is right there in the other room, and boom, their arm will go down. Any kind of negative thinking will make their muscle test weak. So he was very interested in this. He wondered what it is that keeps an arm strong. And he came up with this idea, the homing thought, which is he called it a homing thought because he was thinking of pilots who were off course and suddenly having to find their way home. And he found over thousands of testing, and he's muscle tested so many people. He's found that over all of these testings, the one thing that keeps your arm strong is your mission statement, which is your divine purpose, the thing that you were put on this earth to do. And I think I said earlier in the weekend, this doesn't have to be a grand job. You don't have to be the Prime Minister of England. You don't have to be changing the world. You can be a fantastic gardener. You can be somebody who just enjoys a great conversation. You might be the best neighbor of your block, somebody who helps the people who are in need. You might be somebody who finds it most rewarding of all to go read a story to an old person. You can be somebody who's a fantastic cook, or that totally undervalued activity. You can be a really great mother. Any of these things if they put you in touch with the divine, that is your purpose. It is, in a sense, your mission statement. Now, I want to take this idea one step further and throw out this possibility that you are an intention experiment. You and your life are an intention statement. Everything you do and say are all part of your intention experiment, all part of your intention statement. And so what's very important is to make that mission statement coherent. Many people, as I said earlier in Saturday, have an intention to do good in the world, but their work is highly destructive. You know, I had a woman who was a really lovely woman who worked for me, was really interested in philanthropy, but she had worked for Coca-Cola. And she just got to the point where she said, I just can't do this anymore. I am rotting the teeth of the children of the world. I can't do this anymore. And so that's one thing, to look at your work. Is your work consistent with your mission statement in some way? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the central mission statement, but as long as it isn't conflicting your real mission statement. And so look at that. Look at how you are In your relationships, are you, like I told you before, that wonderful psychologist who was a great philanthropist, who realized only after his wife walked out the door that he'd been ignoring her and his family for years in his zeal to be a do-gooder? Look at your communal intention statement. How are you with your community? I hope to create another community for you with this weekend. But how is that working with your intention? Is that coherent? All of these things, all of your life, should be coherent as an intention experiment. Now, you can find your life's central mission statement if you don't know it already. How many people have a coherent mission statement they understand as their divine purpose? How many people? How many people are still confused about what that might be? Okay, we've got about half and half. I figured we might. What were your natural talents as a child? What were your natural skills that come the easiest? What were the accomplishments that you had? I'm just reading these out, but they're all in there. So you can take some time mulling them over. And we'll just share for a few minutes when we come back. What were your accomplishments that you had, you effortlessly did? I watch my daughter, Anya. Our daughter, Anya, is a natural kinesthetic genius. She is a brilliant athlete. Everything she throws the ball, it's out of sight. She connects with the ball with a bat, it's out of sight. She runs fast. Anything she does, she's a netball genius. But she's also kinesthetic in every regard. She's a brilliant dancer, and her sense of space is fantastic. She drives once someplace, and she knows exactly how to get there, which is great, because I never know. So that is her accomplishments come easiest to her when it's that kind of area. That's her particular genius, and it's what fills her with joy. I watch her in activity, and I can see she's got the life force right there. So look at things like that. Any other activity that puts you in touch with the divine, what is it that you do that stops you from even thinking about the time? That just where you lose time, you lose a sense of even being there. You are transported. Whatever that is that listening to music? Is it playing music? You know, and identify what aspect of it is that you really love. And when you've started looking at all of those kinds of things, from when you were a child to now, then start looking at your strong trends and visualize yourself doing these activities. You can even, we don't really have time today to teach muscles testing, nor am I an expert at it. But you can, if you've done it before, get tested or have yourself tested. When you're holding that thought of that is your life's mission statement, are you holding a strong thought? And if somebody then throws a negative word toward you, do you continue to test strong? And that will give you the sense of the power of this. And the reason I suggest this is because I believe that when you are being, as it were, attacked by negative intention or weakened in your own mind by negativity, that is, of course, going to come your way at some point. I believe the strongest and most effective counter to that is just holding on to what you were put on this earth to do. Just holding on to your divine purpose, your mission statement. And that, just honing in on that, can be one of the most potent things there is. All of those questions I have on your sheets so you can look at them. While you're doing that, I'd also like you to think about the size of your resistance. Because many times when we have a desire to change our life's purpose, we also have a lot of limiting beliefs. So one of the other things that I'd like you to write down is the size of your resistance. How big is it? How much does it weigh? Get a sense of it. Even look at it physically, if that helps. But write down some of the reasons why you can't do this. And then look at those, really look at those, and see if they truly are as big as you think.
I thought that was great, actually.
I liked it too. It was great.
Yeah, I've done like Jasmine stuff where you kind of have to sit and meditate about what is your purpose and all this. But I like what Lynn does in, like looking for these patterns in your life, right? And getting you to reflect on what you feel you've done really well as a child and continue to do through your life.
It was a tough one to call because I'm thinking, well, she's got all this list up there, and she wants me to think about when I was a child, what I had accomplished. I didn't accomplish anything. I was a child. I was waiting to get there. And when I look back on it, because I was running through my mind, I don't really have any sort of spontaneous recollection of me being being significant anyway as a child. I did play some sports, but I wasn't outstanding at anything. I hadn't accomplished anything really. So to go back to that would be a difficult thing for me, to go back to childhood and see how I affected the world, because I basically, I was a kid. I didn't know any better.
Well, I don't think that's what she was getting at. She's looking at those things you really enjoyed doing as a child, right? I think that's what she was saying. Like with me, very much, I like to be creative, drawing, painting, but mostly drawing, and also making things, with my hands, like crafts and that sort of thing, right? The creative process is something I've always enjoyed.
I think I was a dumb kid. I didn't do any of that until later in life. Not to make light of it, but I'm thinking, did I really do anything? I'm sure my mother would have told me I did. Yeah, you were something, you were. Yeah, but
She also talked about the whole idea of creating a community, which I thought was, really good, and coherence, right, in your life.
connect things.
Yeah, but really look at things where you lose yourself in it, right? You're so focused on it and being so creative in some way that it comes across as your true purpose of being here. And then the muscle testing, by the way, she talked about John Diamond, and he's the man that wrote the book Power versus Force. And so
Versus what?
Power versus Force.
Force. Okay.
Yes, but he does talk about the muscle testing. So that's the first time I've seen where someone talked about it in regards to thoughts. And I did watch a short clip where he was doing that. But I know when you go to these naturopathic doctors, they often will do the muscle test, put a substance, or certain pills in that in your hand, and then they try and push your arm down.
I wonder if that's what Scientology is getting at when they tell you you're going to be clear, right? I guess that would be the state of not being affected by things that aren't, necessarily going to good for you, be that good for you. Because she said, what was it she said about your trash, or she gave him a negative thought. And I thought it was kind of interesting, just because she just pulled it out of anywhere, and anything can affect us.
That's right.
So we have to realize how vulnerable we are to that negativity a lot of times, and admit to it. And that's difficult to do because of our egos and the fact that we want to stay strong at all times. And if we can't, we don't want to admit that to ourselves very often.
Well, I think the whole point of her talk there was to say, if you have a strong sense of purpose, right, or a strong mission statement, that when negativity comes your way in regards to your abilities, your skills, whatever, you stand strong, right, because of that. So you build up a strong resistance against negativity.
Yeah, that's what she's trying to get.
Cody,
Sounds easier than it is, I'm sure, but that's those are rules to live by. Little rules to live by.
Faith, Cody, Dave, any comments?
Yeah, the muscle testing, it's kind of accurate, but I'm not sure how accurate. Sometimes it's been wrong, so in my experience.
Yeah.
But I find that most of the time it's accurate. It could be that I just did something wrong, or did it wrong, or misinterpreted it or something.
Oh, anything's possible, but
I
it's an
think
interesting concept for sure.
Yeah, I think it's good to have someone do it to you rather than you trying to do it yourself.
Oh, yeah, yeah, thanks, because I think that your own bias gets in the way or your own
That's right.
desires, so
Yeah.
it gets like it's not as objective.
And Cody, do you have any comments?
You know, I've had the muscle testing thing done on me, and I'm sort of neutral on it. I need more education or more experience or something. You know,
Those times that you were tested, Cody, were they the results you would think they should be? Like, did they affect you in one way or another? Like, were you agreeing with them or not agreeing with them?
in all of the times except one, I forget. But the last one, the one I just had within the last week, I disagreed with the result. And I just, you know, I was holding my arm out and he pushed on it and he said it was weaker. And I thought, no, it's not.
Ah, yeah, well,
So,
you're involved in the testing too.
Yeah.
yeah, well, it was interesting. So it was all too pat. It's like you're just using something quick, bang, bang, bang.
Hmm.
Yeah, we need to do the answer. Boom, there's the answer. It was all done without thought, like mechanistic. And I thought, well, I don't think that's a very valuable tool.
Well, it's the tool or the person that's doing it to you, right? Are they sincere in what they're doing?
Mm,
right?
Very
Are they-
important, I bet.
You know, because
Yeah.
years ago, you know, I'd gone to other like naturopaths and all that. But I met a man in Hamilton, Dr. Patel, and he's no longer there. He works, I think, in Niagara Falls area. But he was probably the best naturopathic doctor I've ever been to. He was very caring, very thoughtful, as you know, just I thought one of the best human beings I've met in my life. And he had a great impact on me, right? Really improved my health, shifted it greatly. So I think, you know, it is the individual too that's doing these tests on us that can have, you know, an impact on us in a
Was,
negative or positive way.
was he a better listener than a talker?
Yes, he was really, and you just got a sense he was very compassionate.
Yeah, on this subject, I think it may be a study that you have to work with that person for some time to get a good baseline of what's going on. It's just, I don't think it's just a one-off kind of deal and they're just gonna know everything about you. I think it's sort of like you just have to get to know yourself in that
You
situation.
think you have to trust the tester?
Yeah, but I think it's something, it reminds me of dream interpretation. It's something that you just have to have a large study of to get to understand yourself. So I don't think it's something that just you go in and you see this naturopath one time or whatever practitioner it is and they're going to know. I think it's something that, you know, if they're going to be part of your, you know, people who help in your health, it's a relationship that you get more understanding from over time and you get to know yourself and them and they get to know you. And, you know, I think it needs, you know, you need to work with this person for some time. That's my thoughts on that anyway.
Needs to mature.
Yeah, you just need more information to
I
get a
think
clear picture.
I'm convinced that it might be the practitioner who some are more skilled than others. For example, I went to a
Oh, yeah.
chiropractor and man, was he good with that muscle thing. He could crack your back or whatever he was doing and then test with his muscle test and it was fabulous. He was really, he was one of the guys I thought, whoa, boy, if everybody was as good as you, I'd want to learn this as a method of healing or as a method of telling whether someone had been healed. He
Is
was
that
very
method,
skillful. Pardon
Cody,
me?
is that method a machine you're talking about, muscle test?
No, it was the one where you hold your arm
Same thing.
out
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then it's either strong or weak. And if it's strong, it can hold when they push. And if it's
got
weak,
you,
it
sorry.
goes.
I got you, bud.
Yeah. And so his wasn't any toxic substance. He was bending your body and doing whatever chiropractors do, and then testing to see if he got it right. And sometimes if he didn't get it right, then he'd do it again, he'd crack it again, whatever. So that was his way of telling whether he had done the job. And I think he was the best chiropractor I've ever been to. I haven't been back for, like, he actually cured me with,
Yeah. Are you gonna say?
some of these guys that you got to go back every month for the rest of your life. And this was what I was doing. I was going every month for 6 months. And then he said, well, you're done. You don't have to come back. And he was right.
Well, I hope you sent him a Christmas card at least.
You know, I didn't. I think I better do that. I guess it's too late for last year, isn't it?
Maybe.
So the last one is where she just talks about the intention experiment. But she gives a few little things that you could do to test it. If you'd like, we could look at that, get your feedback, and that will be it, okay? Are you open to that?
I really like the first one. Yeah.
Okay.
Into the intention experiment, because I've talked this weekend mostly, and we've both discussed and worked with you on living with intention. But what we're trying to do as well is to demonstrate that there actually is a science to intention, and that intention works on a mass scale. And that's the whole idea of the intention experiment, to actually test that. How far can we go? How far do our thoughts matter in terms of changing the world? So I don't know if you're aware of this, but the intention experiment is a living book. So it's not only a book about the science of intention, but it's also an ongoing experiment in which I involve the readers in what is the biggest mind over matter experiment in history. We have been running a number of experiments. We've started with just a little leaf in a group in London in 2007, March 2007. And we had an audience a bit bigger than this, about 400 people. And I asked them to send intention to one of 2 leaves that were in Arizona. We've been working with the University of Arizona. Dr. Gary Schwartz the noted psychologist, has generously given his time, as have a number of other noted scientists. And he has his special camera equipment that I showed you yesterday. We sent intention to make the leaf glow. He didn't know which leaf we sent it to. He then put both leaves under his special equipment and found that the leaf sent intention was truly glowing. And he said to me, called me up after I unblinded the study, because as I said, he took those measurements before he knew which leaf we'd sent intention to. And he was very excited. He calls me up and he says, Lynn, you won't believe it. This leaf is glowing so much that the other one is darker than usual. It's almost been neglected. So we were encouraged by that. And we went to a series of germination intention experiments. We wanted to see if we could make plants grow faster with our thoughts. This time, we had 4 sets of things being experimented on, 4 sets of 30 seeds. And I decided to run the first experiment in Sydney, Australia. The 4 sets of seeds, meanwhile, were sitting back in the Tucson, Arizona lab. I had the audience choose one of the 4 sets of seeds. Once again, the scientists didn't know which ones we sent. We sent intention for them to grow faster and grow a certain number of centimeters by a certain number of days. The scientists, when we were done, planted all 4 sets of seeds. And lo and behold, the one sent intention grew significantly higher. So then everywhere I went, I started running this experiment. I ran it with a group of 100 in Rhinebeck, New York, sending intention to in Arizona. I ran it from Hilton Head, South Carolina. I ran it from Austin, Texas. I ran it over the internet with thousands of people from many countries around the globe. And in each instance, we had a significant effect. The plants grew faster. Those little seeds in Arizona were affected by people sending intention from thousands of miles away. So then we moved on to water. And we just sent love to water, a kind of an Emoto experiment, this time working with the physicist, Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, sending love to see if we could change anything in its photonic emissions, because water, as well as living things, has light emissions. And we found that we had an effect. So we moved on to trying to change its cluster structure. Because water clusters together, the molecules of water cluster together like the rooms of a house. And there are little weak bonds that occur between these molecules. Up to 100 molecules can cluster together in a very strange formation. And the scientists believe that these can be changed by subtle mechanisms, electromagnetic fields, but also intention. And that changing that cluster structure may change water from ordinary water to healing water. So we've tried that. Our first intention experiment was run with Penn State University with water. And we've come up with a result they can't figure out how to quantify. We did something to the water, but they're not sure what. They have to go back and get more sensitive equipment. So they're doing that. We're doing the water experiment again. But of course, the implications of the water experiment are enormous. Look at the globe and how much water there is. You yourself are a giant water vessel, as we talked about. You yourself are also a tape recorder. Remember, we talked about the fact that water magnifies the signal. So if we can change water, we can change so many things in the world. We're working in the future on a bacteria experiment with water in trying to mutate bad bacteria to good bacteria. If we can affect that, we might be able to affect polluted water. We have a number of other experiments I'll talk to you about in a moment that I'd like you to join me in. But I also want to talk to you about the power of the group, because somebody said to me, you know, well, what about, people are sending me negative intention and I still don't know how to really ward that off. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story that happened to me in Austin, Texas. I was talking in front of a group, and there was a woman who was very agitated, obviously wasn't enjoying herself in this workshop, very similar to this. So she came up to me and started really criticizing it. And she finally just turned to me and said, "You're a joke." And I went, ooh, you know, the force of her anger really knocked me back. So I just realized that she was being very disruptive. So I did what I usually don't do, and I said, "I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave." And I was so upset by the whole experience that I started to tear up. And all of a sudden, out from the audience, everybody came up one by one and created a giant donut around me. And by the time they'd finished, there were 4 or 5 people deep, just holding hands around me. It was like a power hug. And it was one of the strongest experiences I've ever had, besides meeting Brian, I think. But it was such a powerful antidote to negative intention. It's another reason why we want to create these little groups. Whenever you feel beset and overwhelmed by life's tough road, you know you've got a group here to engage in a group hug. I also want to tell you something else about negative intention. You know, somebody was talking to me, a philosopher actually, and saying that oftentimes the reason we fight back when somebody criticizes us is that we're not sure of ourselves. You know, she said, imagine going into your doctor's office and him saying, "I'm sorry to tell you this, Mrs. Hubbard, but you're actually a rabbit." Well, I would just laugh at that. I wouldn't say anything to it. I would just say, "Yeah, right." And that's because of the certainty I know that I'm a woman. And this is the same kind of certainty we have to bring to things in knowing who we are, that divine purpose. Once you really know who you are, no matter what anybody throws at you, they probably can't knock you back. So these are our intention experiments. We're planning and creating a little Gaia-sphere. It's a little glass terrarium, like a mini world, working with the University of Arizona. And we're going to fill it with primitive animals and plants and see if we can affect the temperature or the CO2 levels with our thoughts. And if we can, that will have enormous significance and potential to cure ecological problems. We're going to do that pollution experiment I talked to you about. We're also creating, and this has happened almost despite myself, it's kind of turned into a live aid of intention experiments. We're running a series of peace intention experiments, attempting to lower violence in hotspots around the world. I mentioned this to Deepak Chopra when I was on his radio show, and he immediately said he would like the Alliance for New Humanity to be involved. I mentioned it to the Association of Global New Thought, and she said, I'm going to get entire churches to be involved, and let's run it on September 14th, our first one, because it's right after 9/11, and it'll be a wonderful antidote to those memories and those photographs that keep showing up on the anniversary. So we're going to be running it with entire New Thought churches on September 14th. So please write down that date. And we're running, then the Unity churches got involved. And then the Spiritual Cinema Circle got involved, and Gaiam. And before long, we have the potential of hundreds of thousands of people being involved with this intention experiment. So please write down this date, and please check our website and join in on these intention experiments. All it requires is 10 minutes of your time to do something that may change the world. The other thing you can do is go away with your own intention experiments. One of the ones that we talk about is to try to do something that never happens in your life. So if you're a woman and your husband never brings you flowers, you know how I said don't try to do anything coercive? Well, this is the exception to the rule. So send an intention to have him send you flowers, and if it changes, if something happens, you'll know your intentions had an effect. Or if you're a man and you love football and your woman can't stand it, send an intention for her to come and sit down and watch the Arsenal game with you and see what happens. Or if your kids never make their beds, as ours never do, send an intention, we're still working on that one, to have them make their beds. I had a woman tell me about this in London. We've had several do the flower thing and have really amazing results. This one woman in England, garden center with my husband, he never buys me flowers. And I was so overwhelmed by all those beautiful flowers that I sent an intention to him to do this. We were standing in line to pay, and all of a sudden he rushed away, and he came back with this giant pot of gardenias, and he said, I just had this, it was almost like a mental order. I just had to go out and use flowers. If you do this, report on our website, please. Tell everybody what's happened. We wanted to show you our masters of intention. You know about Ollie. Whenever Ollie wants a walk, he gets it. He sends this psychic message to Brian, and Brian all of a sudden picks up the lead. And this is our daughter, Anya. And Anya, what Anya wants, Anya often gets. We found this lately. She's lost her iPod. So being good parents, we've said, no, you have to save up your money and buy your own. So she's now working us. She called us up when we were in Chicago and said, while you're there, do you think you could pick up an iPod for us? And we said, no, we're, you're going to have to save up. So she's been taking to leaving pictures of us, of iPods, by our bed every night, seeing if that might do it. Leaving a little trail of pictures. Or calling us up and saying, you know, that iPod I saw, you know, I don't want it anymore. She's even trying reverse psychology. So I know this is a master of intention in the making. Before we leave you, we want to just let you know that we have discussion groups. We've started on our website, Living the Field, livingthefield.com, tools for a new world. And we're starting discussion groups. We have things like Children in the Field. So we invite you to be part of those discussion groups. We offer free downloads that people can have to spark the discussion, but we also ask everybody in a community to share some of their information about trying to create a new world together. We have weekly e-news, and you're welcome to sign on for either Living the Field news or the Intention Experiment. So it's livingthefield.com or theintentionexperiment.com. I'll have the websites up in a minute, don't worry. And you get e-news from us. And also, and those are e-news, both of those are written by me every week. And don't forget What Doctors Don't Tell You for weekly information about health. And that one is written by Brian. He's very funny. People love just laughing about medicine, etc. with him. So please look at our other website too. And don't forget to come back to our Intention Experiment site after this weekend. We'll notify you, but your group will be up there and you can continue the journey. So I want to leave you with this little story about this bear who came over the mountain. As you can see, this is a polar bear who just wandered into Canada's Hudson Bay one day. And Norbert Rosling is a photographer, and he was there with a bunch of husky dogs. And he was suddenly alarmed when he saw this polar bear because he figured, oh my goodness, my huskies are lunch for this bear. So he was terrified. He thought, there they go, eat or be eaten. But he was astonished because the bear just wanted to play. And the bear came around at the end of the day at dusk just to play with those dogs. And he ended up coming back night after night to play with those dogs. So maybe one good thought is all it takes to change the world. Thank you very much.
Ah,
There you go.
That was cool.
Nice finish.
Yeah. So I like her work, and it's interesting she has those free downloads. I'll take a look at them for discussion points too. And any final comments from people?
Remember when we were talking, or she was talking at first? I wrote a little thing down. She talked about the effect others have on ourselves. And I thought of this, I find in crowds, when I'm in crowds, it's very draining. I don't know if that's resonates with anybody, but I find, and I didn't used to find this that much. I used to enjoy crowds, but as I got older, when I went to sporting events and stuff like that, I just found crowds the opposite of what I once did. I found that they took, instead of excited me, they depressed me because they drained my energy. Now, I don't know if that's got anything to do with what, but it's just what I see in myself.
Yeah.
And the fact that people do give their intentions to other people. So maybe as I'm older, I'm just more paranoid. I don't know. But my attitude towards them has certainly changed.
Also, well, I think too, that's another thing. You know, I think about Dave and I here in Vancouver, and for the last maybe 3-4 years, Dave and I have talked about leaving Vancouver. It's, too big, too busy, a lot of negative things about, right? But then, so we drew like a picture of what we wanted. We have it actually taped on the mirror here, right? And, we were sending intentions we want. And then we realized that actually we had everything that was in that picture right here where we are. So we actually changed our perception of things. So I go back to your perception of crowds now, right? Sometimes it's just things in our perception have changed.
I asked myself that. Yeah.
Mhm.
I didn't know about that. That's very nice.
Yeah.
You guys are Vancouverites. I didn't know you're going to take off on us. But especially if your dream, it's like having your dreams come true. You wrote it down, and all of a sudden you realize, well, it's all right here.
Yeah, we have it right here.
Dream is already here. I'm done. I'm happy now.
And another thing we were learning that there are people that were leaving Vancouver, and when they go into remote areas and they realize it wasn't any better.
Yeah.
So Cody, Faith, any final words?
Yeah, I've been working on that one for a long time, many years. Changing perception, and then your outside world changes. And it's not happened yet. So, but I'm hopeful. I'm still, hopeful that it'll happen. I'm working on it.
Okay.
Because I really want to get out of here too, so badly. But I've noticed in the last 20 minutes, my whole energy has changed. Like I started giggling about 10 minutes ago, like compared to how I was feeling when I arrived back here.
Yeah.
Yeah, my whole energy has changed. It's gone up level. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I think her talks they have a positive impact on us. And Cody, any final words?
Nope, I'm just, no, I'm too, sometimes I just have to sit and shut up. And I think this is one of those moments.
Okay.
You don't have to, but we really appreciate it.
Every time I say something, I get confused. So if I shut up, have clear mind.
I like that. I like getting confused when I'm talking. I haven't finished my story. I'm willing to tell you it, but I haven't finished this yet. So listen hard, would you?
Okay.
Talking more
So,
tonight, but so I've taken over for Cody.
okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I thought it was an interesting night, and I will be adding those short clips. They will be in the long version of the video, but I'll also have the short clips posted on the site for people.
All right. See you later, everybody.
Yeah.
See ya.
Good to see you. Didn't hear you.